house, 67 Pfalzgrafenstraße, with my sister and my parents. And this building, perhaps you know it too, my grammar school. By the way, my name is Ursula Michel. I've just turned 15, I go to school, and when I have time I love swimming in the River Rhine. So really, it's a normal everyday life. At least it was until last Wednesday. It's November 1938, and since last week, everything has changed. Let's start at the beginning. I was born in Ludwigshafen on the 26th of October 1923 and named Ursula Henriette Barbara Michel. 4 years later, my sister Lily came into the world, and since then there have been 4 of us. Here you can see us with our parents Heinrich and Gertrud on holiday in the Black Forest. My father is Jewish and my mother and we girls were baptized Protestant, so we're Christian. Our father fought in the Great War, became a corporal, and was awarded the Iron Cross. After the war, he worked as a civil servant in the Justice Department of the District Court. Until 3 years ago, he was forced to retire. He was only just 50.
It begins on the 30th of January 1933. With the appointment of Adolf Hitler as Reich Chancellor, everyday life changes abruptly for political opponents of National Socialism and for Jewish citizens and their families. From April 1933, for example, most Jewish civil servants and those in political opposition have to resign or retire. But that's only the first step. It's followed by a boycott of Jewish businesses and cuts in education for Jews, an underhand form of discrimination. Then, finally, in 1935, the so-called Nuremberg race laws are passed.
In 1933, when the very severe race laws were enacted, my mother's family became a Jewish family. My grandfather was Jewish by religion and a practicing Jew. The others had Judaism in their background, but were practicing Christians. But my mother was only 10 years old, and I don't think then, in 1933, she really kind of understood what was happening.
As time goes on, more things are forbidden to us. No swimming bath, no cinema. It's so strange. While our everyday life becomes more restricted, for most non-Jewish people it remains absurdly normal. We learn to get round things. But on Wednesday last week, something happened that I still can't believe. It's the 9th of November 1938. Stormtroopers, thugs in uniform, simply broke into our apartment. They chopped our furniture up, cut the mattresses open. It was so cruel. Luckily, we were able to hide in our neighbor's apartment. And as if that were not dreadful enough, next morning stormtroopers came again to arrest our father. They took him into protective custody, as they called it.
The Night of Broken Glass, the nationally organized pogrom against Jews. From the 9th to the 10th of November 1938, synagogues and Jewish prayer houses in the whole of German-occupied Europe are burned. Jewish shops are destroyed, apartments raided, people abused and murdered. Violence organized by the regime. This night marks the transition from discrimination to systematic persecution of Jews, which leads to the Holocaust. Arrests follow the next day. On the 11th of November, 65 Jewish men from Ludwigshafen, including Heinrich Michel, are taken to Dachau concentration camp, where they're abused, intimidated, and terrorized.
In December, father was brought back from Dachau concentration camp, and he has really changed. He kept totally silent about it. And now it's 9 months later, summer 1939. We had to move out of our apartment in Pfalzgrafenstraße, and now we live in Mannheim, at age 7-13. We hope that it will be better living in a bigger Jewish community. But here too we can't go to school anymore, and we're lucky to be able to spend a lot of time with the Schwab family.
Die haben räumlich ganz schrecklich gewohnt. Und in diesem Haus müssen auch furchtbare Menschen gewesen sein, die sie beleidigt haben und alles. Ne? Deswegen wollten die auch gar nicht, dass wir hinkommen. Die haben immer gesagt, ihr werdet ihr genauso beleidigt. Vor uns als Kinder ist überhaupt nichts geheim gehalten worden. Da ist alles gesprochen worden. Und zum Schluss hieß es dann immer, aber Kinder, ihr dürft dann nicht drüber sprechen. Dann passiert was ganz Schreckliches. Und das haben wir auch gemacht, meine Schwester und ich. Aber gesprochen worden ist immer über alles bei uns. Wir wussten genau, was läuft, auch schon als in der 1. Klasse, immer. Was natürlich auch sehr belastend war.
And the topic that we're talking about most at the moment, Kindertransports. The Schwab family knows the Reverend Maas from Heidelberg. He'll be able to organize something for us. I'll have to go away from home, to England, alone.
The night of the pogrom makes it clear to the world that Germany is preparing a systematic persecution of the Jews. But the entry restrictions of neighboring countries make it extremely difficult to escape from Germany. Through the influence of British Jews, the British government decides shortly afterwards to allow children who are at risk into the country, as long as they are taken care of financially. For their parents, immigration is still forbidden. Contributions are collected, host families sought and found. As early as the 2nd of December 1938, 3 weeks after the night of the pogrom, the first group of evacuated children reaches London.
The day is here and I have to go to the station. It's the 25th of August 1939, so I'll be celebrating my 16th birthday in England. Alone. Why have I got to go away from home? Why is Lily staying here? I'm not allowed to take much with me. 1 piece of hand luggage, a photo, 10 Reichsmark. A larger suitcase will be sent on later. But no books, no games. Only the most essential things. My parents were not even allowed onto the platform. Policemen stopped them. One last glance back. The jostling crowd. I'm off.
About the day of departure, she remembered her family saying goodbye to her at Mannheim Hauptbahnhof, and in fact her grandmother saying to her, you know, you don't have to go if you don't want to. I think my grandmother found it very hard to say goodbye to her older daughter. And my mother remembered that.
Nach der Abfahrt kamen die alle zu uns. Alles hat natürlich fürchterlich geweint. Und die Frau Michel kam zur Tür rein und hat gesagt, ich sehe mein Kind nie mehr. Und das war schrecklich für mich, das weiß ich heute noch. Dieser Tag war einer der schlimmsten in meinem Leben, muss ich sagen. Das war so furchtbar, wie aus diesem ganzen Kreis jetzt die Ursula weg war. Und da wusste man ja auch, irgendwie sieht man die noch mal oder wie fühlt sie sich da? Sie kommt zu fremden Menschen, wie sind die zu ihr? Das wussten wir ja alles nicht. Und kommt sie gut an in England?
The evacuations from Germany save the lives of 10,000 children. Above all, they help Jewish children. Ursula's evacuation is organized by the Reverend Hermann Maas, who heads the Heidelberg branch of the Gruber office. This organization of the Confessing Church primarily helps racially persecuted Protestant Christians, like Ursula. Reverend Maas allows each family to send 1 child to England, usually the eldest. News of the imminent departure often comes at very short notice and is a great strain on the families.
It all happened so suddenly. Soon after my arrival, my mother wrote, "Meanwhile, it's now the 1st of September and the world has turned upside down. Perhaps everything will right itself. But don't worry, the dear Lord will put everything right." But it didn't right itself. Barely 1 week after my arrival, on the 1st of September 1939, Germany seized Poland. Now we have war. My transport was one of the last to leave Germany. And in the meantime, my life is somehow normal. I live with the Hawthorne family now, and I attend the Orm Girls' School. I like it here, and most people are very nice. I have a new brother and a sister and a dog. Gypsy. My English is slowly getting better, and I'm getting good marks at school. I'm really going to work hard, so that I won't be a burden on the Hawthorne family for any longer than necessary. 1st of February 1940. A letter from my mother. My darling Ursel, finally, after almost 3 months, we've got news of you again. Whatever were you thinking of?
When I was, I think, in my late teens, perhaps 17 or 18, my mother and I were talking one day, and she herself said that she had not been a very good girl and had not written to her family as often as she should. And I asked her why she hadn't written, and she just said, "Oh, I expect I was just too busy settling into my new life." And even then, I thought that that was probably not quite true, that she said that as an easy way of explaining why she hadn't written. And I think the real reason must have been something much, much deeper than that. I think she felt upset, perhaps, and rejected by her family, even though their motives had been very, very good. I think she found that very hard to cope with.
In fact, many are lucky enough to have a host family, but unfortunately, this isn't the reality for all the children from Germany. Some are initially housed in refugee camps or children's homes. Some are even used as cheap labor. After the outbreak of war, some children are handed back by the host families. Others are suspected of being spies, because as Germans, they are officially enemy aliens. Despite some restrictions, most of the children integrate quickly into their new country. They take their school leaving exams, go into the armed forces. They want to give something back to England. Nevertheless, it's often not realized that for many of them, this radical separation from their own families is a lifelong trauma.
It's 1946. The war's over at last. I'm still living in England, and now I'm called Ursula Rhodes. In July, I married Harold Leo Rhodes. He's just beginning his studies as a mining engineer. Nobody from my family could be at my wedding. They are no longer alive. Only after the end of the war did I find out what had happened to them. While I was taking my school leaving exams and qualifying as a secretary, my family were being murdered in a concentration camp. In 1942, my mother wrote, "Dearest Ursel, we are well. We'll be leaving on the 24th of April, destination unknown." Only much later did Lily's letter reach me. Mom and Dad are in Izbica. I've been here in Travniki for a few weeks to work. Everything's fine and I'm well. That was the last I ever heard from Lily, and of course it bore no relation to the truth. But what else could she write? The camp in Poland was a brutally run work camp where SS guards were trained too. Later I found out that shortly before the deportation, Father and Lily tried to escape to Switzerland. Our mother would have followed afterwards. They were only a few meters from the border when a soldier shouted, "Stand still or I shoot."
I think what happened had a really radical effect on my mother and on her mental health. She talked about having had some sort of breakdown when she was, I think, in her 20s. And I think that must have been associated with knowing that her family had gone forever. I think my mother developed strategies to explain things to herself. And over the years, I think perhaps they changed slightly. And she certainly, I think, invented a story to herself to explain why she survived. And especially Lily, didn't, and that was that her parents sent her away because they couldn't bear to part with Lily. That perhaps both girls would have gone, but Lily was their favourite. And I wish she had read her mother's letters again. And she would have known how wrong that was, because it's very clear from the letters that they loved her every bit as much as they loved Lily.
Ursula Rhodes lives in England until her death in 2011. Together with her husband Harold and daughter Judith, she frequently visits relatives in Berlin or the Black Forest. But she cannot and will not go back to Ludwigshafen. Ursula Rhodes herself never returns to Ludwigshafen. On the initiative of her daughter Judith, Stolpersteine, or stumbling blocks, commemorate the Michel family in Pfalzgrafenstraße, the only place of remembrance for the whole family. Up to now, 166 Stolpersteine have been laid in Ludwigshafen and over 40,000 throughout Europe, to remind us of the fate of people who were persecuted and murdered under National Socialism.